Hi, and welcome to the Why I Love podcast. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the game series Civilization and try to understand why I love it so much that I've literally wasted days and days and days of my life playing it. I think really the only way to start this is to go back to what I think is the beginning of my contact with Civ. I don't think I've ever played Civilization 1. I think it was Civ 2 that I started on, and I don't know how I ended up owning it, but I still have that copy now that I bought then. It's one of the biggest, sort of deepest PC game boxes that I own in my very small collection that I've saved from old PC games. It comes with this huge manual, which is amazing, and is basically an encyclopedia of all the units, all the gameplay mechanics, and everything that is now just built into the games digitally. So yeah, I don't know how I actually ended up owning it. My first real memory of it is just talking to someone at school who also owned it. I remember I'd played it quite a bit, and one of the biggest problems I always had is that all my cities would end up rebelling against me because they were so unhappy. And this is because I was playing this game with no concept of how it worked. And partially that was because I was younger, but I mean, also now, there's a lot of stuff I don't understand when I play the new ones, and even after so many hours with them, I'm still Googling certain features and little techniques and stuff all the time to work things out and try to understand the way stats work and stuff. And back then, obviously, the internet wasn't a thing. This didn't happen. I couldn't just go online and search for these answers. So sort of an experience that I don't know, maybe kids get now, but something I definitely don't have now, where I'll just play something over and over and try and work the systems out all on my own. And I had the time to do that, I suppose. So I spent a lot of time with Civ 2 just trying to get the basics down. But I definitely didn't understand all the basics of this game because, like I said, I remember talking to my friend at school and he explained to me why all my cities were in rebellion, and basically I wasn't kind of manually setting out the way cities should work so that they would actually have enough food to feed the people in that city. So I was basically just a horrible dictator who starved all of his citizens, and I thought I was doing a really good job until I started talking to him. Now, this guy at school, he was learning the game too, and I think this is a weird thing to kind of love a game series for, but in some ways, a little part of why I love Civ is just this, really. It's this connection I had with this guy and the way that we kind of both learned certain things together and would share ideas and try things out and try to explain things to each other that we'd worked out about the game. I know that's not really the game itself, but I mean, looking back at other games that I really like, most of the reasons why I actually love the series so much, it is sort of more of a personal connection, perhaps outside of the game, rather than the gameplay itself. And I just remember thinking this was great, that I could go in school and have this one other person and nobody else had a clue what we were talking about. And it was just so cool to kind of learn something that day and then be really excited to go home and try it out on the game and see if it was going to make a big difference to my civilization. But there was some stuff about Civ that I had to learn on my own, and often the hard way. One really stupid fond memory I have of Civ, and it's just something that makes me seem so dumb, but just remember that I was a kid when I was playing this. So there's a little feature in Civ. The way it works is basically that you give each of your units a movement command. If you don't want them to move, you just hit the space bar and it moves to the next person. Now, that's fine early on in the game when you might just have sort of like 3 or 4 units. But as you go along, you'll build big armies, and what you do is you fortify a unit. So you can press a button or just hit the F key normally, and that means they will kind of go to sleep. This is a great feature because what it means is if you have hundreds of units, you don't have to hit spacebar every single time. But try telling me that when I'm a child, because I didn't know this. So what I did instead was press the spacebar about 50,000 times. And I thought that this was just how you played the game. I did this over and over. I would do this to get to the end of my turn, and then I would hit enter, and the computer would take their turn, and then I would press spacebar again and again and again, because all my troops were just like fortified along the border, but they weren't fortified, they were just stood still. But this really came to a head when I tried some of the scenarios in Civilization 2, because one of them was the World War II scenario, which started in the middle of the war. Your army was huge and everyone else's armies were already huge, and the idea was you just had to play from there and try and win the war. Hitting spacebar over and over wasn't an option. Instead of working out the fortify system, which probably would have taken me about 8 seconds of reading, what I did instead, which what I thought at the time was a smart thing, was to develop the purse method, which was to get my mum's big heavy purse and rest it just in the right place on the spacebar so that it would cycle through all of my troops over and over and over and over. And this is how I played Civ 2 for years. I never knew about that fortify button. I used to get the purse all the time, put it on the keyboard. My parents must have thought I was insane, where I just played a game where I mainly just left a purse on a keyboard and walked away for 10 minutes and then came back. And the funny thing is, all of this isn't even the stupidest thing that I ever did on Civ. Because when I first started playing, and again I think this is Civ 2, I'm not sure that I ever played Civ 1, but when I first started playing it didn't have support for the mouse, or whether it was just our mouse that didn't work with the game, or I'm not quite sure, but I remember that I always had to use the arrow keys to move around. What was strange though, however, is that the AI could move diagonally, and obviously using the up, down, left and right keys, I could not. And you probably guessed where this one is going, because yes, I spent, again, possibly years, maybe just weeks, but I think probably years, playing this game with the standard arrow keys, getting seriously annoyed and thinking the game was sort of broken really at points where I needed to move diagonally but couldn't to get through like a thin piece of land or something, and yet the AI could come through. But again, as a kid you used to games just cheating you and the enemy always having better abilities than you, and yet at some point I eventually realised that I should have just been using the number pad keys and that I would have been able to go diagonally the whole time. I think these things, as stupid as they sound, are reasons why I got into Civ in the first place, because it was this huge big game and you always felt like there was more to discover and more things to learn. And then when you did learn something, even if it was something as stupid as not knowing how to move properly, it opened up the game again, and it was like this amazing experience, like all these things I've wanted to do that I couldn't do, I actually could do in this game. And so just when you were maybe getting bored of it, suddenly it was great again, and there was all these different things. And again, like with my friend explaining the food system properly to me, suddenly I was just about to give up on the game because everyone was always rebelling, and now I could actually make a city happy, and now I had a real chance to actually win a game. And I would never do this now. I would quit on a game so quickly if it had things like this that I couldn't figure out. But as a kid, you've just got so much time and so few games as well that this was great. It was almost like the game was brand new again and you had a whole new thing to do every day. And with each of these things, the game started to make a lot more sense. Now, that was Civ 2, and I'm not sure if I ever owned Civ 3. I think I might have done, but I don't really have any sort of big memories of 3, but to be honest, half the memories I've got of 2 might be of 3. This is the thing with Civ, all the versions are so similar. They're so different really when you get to know them, but when you're just looking back, they're so similar, and it's possible that even some of these things might have been on Civ 1. I honestly don't know anymore, but I can't tell you much about Civ 3. I think I played it, but really the next big Civ step for me was Civilization Revolution. So Civilization Revolution was I suppose, simplified version. Well, it was a simplified version, let's say it. It was a console version. The maps were smaller, certain things were sort of taken out and reduced down to help with the processing power and stuff. and systems were simplified because they wanted to try and get console gamers into this huge mammoth game that a lot of PC gamers were even sort of scared to start. Being somebody who'd always liked Civ, and being somebody who at this point had mainly moved away from PC gaming, apart from really like Civ and a couple of other games, this was really interesting to me, the idea that I could play this on a console. And when I first played the game, I was sort of in that crowd too of, oh, they've really dumbed it down and they've taken out some of the cool stuff. And I wasn't sure that I was really going to like it. But that all changed when I upped the difficulty of the game. In all those years of playing Civ 2, I had always just played on the easiest setting because I had no idea what I was doing. And suddenly with the Xbox version, I think I probably put it on the easiest setting and whizzed through it and was like, oh, okay, right, I'm older now. I still have some knowledge of the old systems and I understand these systems a little bit more. I think when I finished the match on easy, I got an achievement, and at that point I was quite into getting achievements and things on the 360. So I had a look through the list, and one of the things was, do it on all the difficulties. So I thought, okay, well, I'll try this a bit different. In the old games, I would be on easy. I'd quite often just use cheats as well on Civ 2, so like if I was losing, I'd just give myself a tank. But this felt a bit more like a challenge. I thought, right, I'll give it a go. I'll start working up the difficulty. And by doing that, even though this was a really simplified version of Civ, I realised there was still a hell of a lot of systems in there that I'd never understood. Things that I thought I maybe understood and absolutely didn't. And by, at this point, having the internet to use to look stuff up, and by trying different things to actually succeed on the harder difficulties, I really just got into properly understanding that game. And I remember eventually putting on the hardest difficulty and thinking I'll never be able to do this, and literally taking it turn by turn and actually having to go in manually to each city and change the production for each turn just to make sure I was getting the absolute maximum amount of things so that I could win. It probably isn't supposed to be that hard, but that's what I had to do to win. But I loved that. Suddenly this game that I'd always enjoyed but never understood felt like this game I'd mastered. And I don't know how many hours I ended up putting into Civilization Revolution, but I'm sure it was a hell of a lot, but probably not as much as I ended up putting into Civ 5. I got Civ 5 sometime later on from Civilization Revolution, and it was almost like going back to the beginning again, because from mastering this sort of simplified version of Civ, I suddenly had a version which was one, maybe two versions newer than the PC ones I'd ever played, and so much stuff had been added that I was just totally lost again. So I actually picked up Civ 5 probably 2 or 3 years after it came out. I got it fairly cheap. It was like a pack with all the add-ons and everything, like a big gold edition. So I had absolutely crazy amounts of new systems to learn. They'd brought in religion since I'd last played it anyway. I think that probably started in 3 or 4. There was the sort of Civ version of the UN. There was massive amounts of technology advancements and things that were new, and cultural advancements, and just things that I had never had to deal with, especially in Civilization Revolution. So this was almost like starting all over again. I played this game a lot. Currently on Steam, it says that I've played 288 hours of this game. I know there's some people out there who play thousands of hours of games. I'm never going to be one of those. 288 hours is a crazy amount of time for me. And even after all those hours, I would still say I maybe only understood about 25% of that game. One thing I actually did, which is another sort of really great memory, a few years ago now, I did a charity games marathon. The place I work at had been around for 25 years and they were trying to raise money. So I decided to try and do a 25-hour marathon. Now, the idea was to just play any video games, but as a testament to how good Civ 5 is, I put Civ 5 on at the start of it and played it for 19 hours straight before getting bored. And actually, I wasn't really even bored then. I just felt like I couldn't say to people that all I'd done was play one game. And just to prove that I wasn't bored, I think the week after that I played more Civ. I probably played more than another 19 hours of it over a few days. Just because whilst doing the marathon, I actually learned quite a few tips from the chat, especially one of my friends who came in and gave me quite a bit of advice. So I kind of wanted to start a new game and do it again with all the stuff I'd learned, just like I was doing back on Civ 2 all that time ago. And now I'm doing the exact same on Civ 6, really. I've played Civ 6 for, according to Steam, 174 hours. And about 30 hours of that has just been in the last week, where I've been trying the new Rise and Fall updates. That 30 hours is all one match. One really long match. I'm at that point now where I just want it to end. But only because I really want to start a new one, because of all the stuff I've just learned in this one. And I think all of this is why I keep just going back to Civ so much. I don't know if this really explains why I love the game, but it's definitely why I play it so much. It's the idea that you can have one 30-hour match, get to the end of it, and the first thing you want to do is just start a new one, because that one wasn't quite right, it didn't quite hit the perfect thing you want. Maybe the difficulty was a bit too easy, or maybe you messed something up early on and that kind of really ruined the whole flow of the game. But it's that idea that the game's always kind of improving and you're always improving as the player, learning the features better, learning new techniques. I think that's why I play so much of it. It's just this dream that one day I will have the perfect Civ game where everything goes right. There's a really dramatic world war, a really dramatic shift in power that I'll never forget. Through all these hours of Civ, 19 days just on Civ 5 and Civ 6, probably another 19 on Civ 2. All that time spent, I still feel like it's just part of an overall huge experience leading up towards what will eventually be the great Civ game.